October 29th, 2033, a drill breaks through the Earth's crust at a depth nobody had ever reached before. And what comes out doesn't just end a drilling operation, it ends the world as everyone knew it. This is the complete story of Toxic Commando, every mission, every character, every piece of lore, from the moment Leon Dorsey's ambition opened a door that should have stayed shut, all the way to the truck that drove into a god's mouth to close it again. If you're new here, this is everything you need to know in one sitting. If you have been watching this whole series, this is everything tied together the way it was always meant to be understood. To tell this properly, we have to go back to before any of it happened. Before the sludge, before the commandos, back to the man who started it all. The man who caused it. Leon Dorsey was not a villain in the traditional sense. CEO of the Obsidian Group, billionaire, visionary. A man who looked at the world's energy crisis, oil wars, climate collapse, civilization running on borrowed fuel, and believed he had found the answer, a limitless energy source buried deep beneath the Earth's surface, clean, unlimited, the kind of discovery that ends every energy crisis humanity has ever faced. Before his drilling operation even began, a group of cultists showed up with a warning. Specific, detailed, they knew exactly where Leon planned to drill, and they knew exactly what was sleeping beneath that location. Something ancient, something that should never be disturbed. Leon listened, and then he drilled anyway. The workers at the site had already started seeing a demonic shape every time they closed their eyes, weeks before the drill ever broke through. The thing beneath the earth wasn't passively waiting. It was already reaching upward. Nobody stopped drilling. That decision is where the actual story begins, because once the drill went through, there was no version of this where things stayed contained. The Sludge God awakens when the drill broke through. What erupted wasn't energy. It was the Sludge God, an entity that had existed beneath the earth since before human civilization. Not a creature that attacks, something that rewrites. The black sludge that poured from the breach didn't just spread. It terraformed, turned soil, hostile, mutated plants and animals. And anyone exposed to it didn't die. They transformed, their consciousness overwritten, their bodies repurposed into an army called Homo Mortis, roamers that overwhelm through numbers, skunks that buff the horde around them, nukers that explode on contact, stalkers that snipe from a distance, snares that immobilize, goons that breach defenses, slobs that simply will not die. A complete military structure built entirely from human beings. The corruption had claimed. Leon's response was to cover it up, hire a fixer named Gallagher, send private military teams in quietly. The cover-up failed within 6 months. The infected zone kept growing. A wall went up around it. The Obsidian Group collapsed, and Leon stayed inside the wall he helped build. Convinced, even then, that he could fix what he'd broken, that is the world. The game actually starts in months after the outbreak. Inside the wall, with Leon already working on a plan, which is where 4 people who had nothing to do with any of this get pulled in. 4 mercenaries, 1 bad delivery. Walter Irons, Cato Armin, Ruby Pelicano, Astrid Shu. They didn't volunteer for any of this. They took a delivery job from a mysterious contact, pick up a package, drop it at an industrial site, get paid. The vehicle got wrecked by a flaming creature before they even reached the destination. They fought through a facility full of infected former workers just to complete the job. And at the end of it, the mysterious contact revealed himself. Leon Dorsey. The package was fuel for a weapon. The delivery failed in the chaos, and the 4 of them were already infected. Leon gave them devices to harness the sludge energy now running through their bodies, turning their infection into a weapon. They never asked for this, they got it anyway. That mission is called the Drop, and it is the door this entire story walks through. Everything from here forward happens because 4 mercenaries got stuck inside a quarantine zone with a billionaire who needed exactly the kind of people who don't ask too many questions. Their first real stop after that was a church. The church that wouldn't fall. Deeper into the infected zone, the commandos found Saint Godard's church still standing when everything around it had been consumed. Survivors inside, led by a woman named Gallagher, the same name as Leon's fixer. Whether she was the same person, the game never confirms directly, but the pattern fits. Someone who went into the infected zone during the cover-up and never came back out, who found a church that had likely been built generations earlier by people who already knew what slept beneath the earth and built something specifically to resist it. She trusted 4 infected mercenaries on site because they helped her people. That trust held for the entire campaign. And the fuel sitting near that church buried under sludge the commandos couldn't yet clear would stay out of reach for missions to come, because at this point in the story, the commandos still didn't have the tools to finish what they'd started, so that became the next phase. The gathering everything. Leon's plan actually required building Leon's weapon. Everything that followed was Leon's plan coming together. Piece by piece, High Octane retrieved the God Killer truck. Leon had built it before the Commandos even existed, stored in an explosives factory that the sludge had wrapped in tendrils, like the infected zone knew exactly what it was protecting. Demon Bait retrieved the pearl, the specific object Leon identified as bait for the Sludge God, sealed inside a military depot and held by the same kind of corruption. Root of Evil cleared a source node near the church, freeing fuel that had been sitting there since the very first visit. Inaccessible until the Commandos earned the ability to reach it. The Catch and Kill tested the weapon on a mutated slob, confirming through actual DNA analysis that the plan would work before Leon committed to a weapon that could only fire once. Throughout all of it, a name kept appearing. Hopewell radar towers, a motel deployment point suspiciously close to a major sludge concentration, helping the Commandos at every turn while their own experiments made the corruption worse elsewhere. Nobody knew, yet, whose side Hopewell was actually on. By the time all 4 of those missions were done, the truck was fueled, armed, and ready. The Pearl was secured, the plan finally had everything it needed, except a way in. The door opens, impasse revealed something the whole campaign had been building toward, without saying it directly. The Sludge God had sealed its own entrance, buried the mine under sludge, so dense nothing could get through, not out of fear, but because something in the infected zone understood the mine was a vulnerability. An EMP tower, possibly positioned there by Leon months in advance, cleared the path, and the infected zone responded with everything it had, trying to seal the door back up before the plan could be finished. The Commandos held it open. With the mine finally accessible, there was only one piece of unfinished business left before the final push could happen, and it had nothing to do with weapons before the end. With everything ready, Gallagher refused to stay. She knew the mine entrance would become the most dangerous place in the infected zone the moment the weapon fired. The Deliver Us sent the Commandos back to the church, not to fight, but to deliver an ambulance and anti-sludge equipment, so she and her survivor could get out alive. Leon himself showed up in person to help when the church gates finally broke. The man who caused the apocalypse, standing at the doors of the one place that had resisted it, making sure the people inside got out before he finished what he started with. Gallagher safely out and the plan fully assembled. There was nothing left standing between the Commandos and the source of everything. The pit everything arrived here. The Commandos descended into the mine with the God Killer truck, fighting through corruption denser than anywhere on the surface. At the bottom they activated the Pearl. The Sludge God didn't come. The Leon's bait had failed. Something was protecting the source point, something called the Hellspawn, guarding a structure the Sludge God had been secretly building in the dark since the very beginning. The Commandos destroyed the Hellspawn, and that is what finally drew the Sludge God out, not the bait Leon planned for, but the thing he never saw coming. Leon arrived in the God Killer truck, fell from above directly into the Sludge God's open mouth. The weapon detonated. The source point was destroyed. Leon survived, wounded alive. The infected zone went quiet. That was supposed to be the ending. It wasn't. 1 year later, the credits rolled, but the sludge itself never disappeared. There, Urban Blight, the update that just released, revealed that Hopewell wasn't an independent researcher at all, but a company that watched humanity survive one apocalypse and decided the leftover corruption was still worth weaponizing. Rockbridge, the city Hopewell had been operating in the entire time, leaked again. A new enemy appeared in the sky. The Hornet, the first flying threat the sludge has ever produced. Something the original Sludge God never created across the entire campaign. Whatever Hopewell did to that sludge, it didn't just make it worse, it made it something new. Which brings the whole story back around to the one thing it has been trying to tell us since the very first mission. What it all means, strip away the zombies and the cosmic horror, and Toxic Commando tells one consistent story. Leon Dorsey drilled too deep because he believed his judgment outweighed every warning he received. The cultists, the dreams, the direct cost of being wrong. Hopewell looked at the aftermath of that exact mistake and made it again anyway. The Sludge God isn't really the villain of this story. It's ancient, vast, indifferent, a force of nature operating on a scale that makes human resistance look almost pointless. The real villain has always been human certainty that refuses to learn. 4 mercenaries who never asked for any of this carried the weight of that certainty across 15 missions. A church held the line because one woman refused to let it fall. They, a billionaire who ended the world, drove a truck into the thing he created and somehow survived long enough to watch it not be enough. That is the complete story of Toxic Commando, and it's not over. If you want a deep dive on any specific piece, Leon, the Sludge God, the cultists, Gallagher, every map, every enemy. The full series is linked below. Watch any of them in any order. They all connect back to this. Subscribe for what comes next, because Urban Blight just proved this story is starting again, and drop a comment after everything you just heard. Do you think Leon is the hero of the story, or the reason it never actually ends? Tell me what you think.